In this video, we'll explore how we can use a number of tools within Caddie, including the AEC Build Tools, to make the design and production of models and drawings, so plans, elevations, for industrial units very, very quick and very, very easy. So we'll have a number of tools which we'll employ, but we'll finish up with a drawing that has all of the ingredients that we'll need, so the building grid, so the labelled construction grid there, so A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. There we've got our steelwork. Now Caddie provides both 2D and 3D options for the steelwork. We're just going to go with the 2D one because you might just be getting a plan in from, say, a structural engineer, for instance. So we'll take that as our starting point. And we have, on top of that, we have our AEC walls. So just panning around here. So we have our AEC walls, which give us the full makeup, so that's a wall style, so it has everything we need within it, so that can be a 3D object. And we can see in our model space viewports here that we're selecting that, it highlights it as a single object. And then we have our doors too, so these again are single objects which include all the bollards as well. So we've got the vision panel, we've got the bollard, all as part of a door which we can insert in one single operation. We also have here AEC Dimensions. So we have our AEC Dimensions with different representations there, and we can have them so they automatically take account of the objects we insert within our walls. So that's where we're going to finish up, and we'll also end up with a 3D model which we can also produce a rendered model from. So we'll have a rendered view complete with any symbols that we might want to bring in. So here we have a commuter vehicle. So we have the building. We've also got some trim around, so we'll see how we can put that around too. But the trim around the doors and the bollards, as I say, they all come from inserting in a single operation. But going back to our Caddie drawing, this is where we'll start. We'll start with setting out the building grid. We'll start with putting the stanchions on after that, and then the walls, and build up from there. So let's have a look at how we can produce that. So we'll see from our dimensions here that our building grid is 6 meters, and we're going to put in our building grid. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bays by 3 across. So let's just put those in. Now we don't have to draw those as individual lines. We can use the apps tool. So here we're going to go through the apps, and in this case the SA Arch apps and the ERF. There are a couple of building grids within Caddie, as well as the overall grid, and I like this one particularly because you can have multi-spaced grids, so you can just type in commas and then the different separations. We have the circle size as well, so that's where the text will go, and OK to that. So I'll just start here, and since I know the size, I'll just type in, and that will give us our building grid, and we'll see that we have within it the 1, 2, 3, A, B, C and so on. So that gives us our building grid. I want to now place on that building grid the steelwork. So again, back to our apps tools, and this time we'll go for the steel application. So we'll go for the steel beaming section. As I say, we do have 3D ones in Caddie too, but this is just a 2D one. We have different profiles, lots of different profiles, all profiles you could need there. So you choose the profile, you choose the orientation, and here down through the sizes, and I'm going to go with the 356 1767. So OK that, and then we'll just choose a snap mode, and I don't need the polar tracking on this one, so we'll just zoom in here. Now I'll just place it, so here we are, just place it down on the grid. Having placed it on the grid, I could choose to copy it manually, so picking it up and saying copy and so forth, but we can do much better than that. I can go for modify, and I could go for the transformations, and I could choose matrix, for instance. So here we have our grid spacing of 6 meters, we have 18 metres in the Y direction, and then the number that we want. So I can use pick options on there to sort of pick from one corner to another and so on. But here I'll just say OK to that, and if I just zoom out a little bit so we can see where we are, we'll see that it places all of those in the drawing straight away. In fact, here, let's just maximise our viewport so that we can see everything in much greater detail. Now, with our grid, we might want to extend these a little, so we can just extend the line. So yeah, just picking on those. We can extend the lines at the ends as well, because this is where I want to pick up the grid in just a few moments' time. Now, having got our Steelwork in, we'll set about putting in the walls. We're going to do these from Polylines, so we could go to the build commands, the draw command and so on. But if I just go to something as simple as a Polyline, so we'll just choose Auto Snap, pick on the corner there, drag down to the other corner, place our Polyline in. Now, there's our Polyline. Under the context toolbar we have offsets, so I know that I need an offset of 135 till we get to the cladding, so purlin will be and so on, so OK that. So I'll just zoom out a little bit, and there's our polyline. I don't actually need the internal one now, so we can get rid of that one, but it does give us our external envelope. So this will be the starting point, the setting out point for our wall. And right clicking over our drawing here, we have convert as one of the options, convert to, and we're going to convert it to a wall. So we'll convert it to a wall. The arrow shows us the direction that the polyline was drawn in. So we have our wall height. We can choose the wall style that we wish, so we can just choose a different wall style in there if we wanted to. We've got the variable width there, which gives us the distance for the purlin. OK to that, and there that's drawn in the complete wall. So if we have a look in here, we've got our complete wall drawn. Having got our walls, we could elect to add the dimensions now. So here we'll add the AEC dimensions. So we see our dimensions here. We can choose a particular style that we wish to use, and we'll just set them back so far from the building. Okay. So the AEC dimensions, they give us that automated reading of the drawing. So again, picking the style, we're just pressing S as it says down here. So I'll pick on there, and I'll just drop those in. So at the moment that's just showing the same distances, but as we introduce objects within our walls, they will automatically pick up our dimensions. In fact, just to make them stand out of them all, let's just change the pen colour on those, so we can change how they look, so we can use them as we would ordinarily use our dimensions. So now we need to introduce doors, windows, and some internal walls too. So looking down here, we could again go up to our wall commands, but I'm going to use the Catalogue. So we have a Catalogue here. So these are a few things that I've put on just for the purposes of this video, but you can use all of the standard ones that are in there as well, anything from doors, windows, kitchen cabinets, sanitary ware, people, trees, cars, and so on. But I'm just going to literally pick my wall and bring that in, and I'll just choose to drop down onto the intersection there, up to the intersection there, and then into our wall. Now coming into this particular corner, let's just move to there so we can see our dimensions in shot as well. We can bring in, say, one of the windows. So if we drag in a window here, so this will come in complete with all the trim around it, and we'll literally just pick a position here, and that's drawn in our window. In fact, if we thought about it, we could have used, again, chosen to make it stand out of the wall, so you can choose whatever size of pen colour you wish. Having got that, and here we could of course set it out accurately, a certain distance from there with construction lines, or setting it out just typing in dimensions. But here we've got our window. It doesn't quite sit where we need it to be within the depth of the wall, but that's not a problem. We can use move the door or window within the depth of the wall, or we could put in our anchor positions here. So I'm just going to type them in because I know what that will be, so that gives us our position there for our window. We can go back to our catalogue, we can bring in our door, and we can very similarly bring in our door. So we just toggle it around till we get to where we want it to be. And when we're putting in internal doors, well, scroll the catalogue, we've got an internal door here, and we can just drop that in there. We can see our grid line underneath, and if we do an option end, we could put in another door there. So again, just toggling around until we get to where we want it to be. Going back to our view here, if I just press Regen, you'll see that those dimensions automatically come into my drawing. And if we further decide that actually we want to bring in the centre lines for our steelwork, our building grid, if we pick on our AEC dimension, we can add in the centre lines there, so just bringing them in. Okay, and we can do the same thing with our dimension here, just picking in our dimension lines there. If we wanted these to be dotted, we could do that as well, but leaving it. So there we have the pattern. We'll just go for the lines and we'll make them into dashed lines. So that shows we can very quickly change the presentation of our drawing to suit our needs. So this gives us our elevation here, or the beginnings of it. Let's look at how we can introduce the window here into this elevation. We could again go to our catalogue, but since we know that we need the 3 windows down here, we can go to our modify tools, go to divide, and we can divide construction lines between 2 points. So we'll have 4 divisions, an endpoint snap here, and so we'll say between there and there. Okay, so let's set up a position, so we can literally now just take our window, right click, copy, and then if we choose our snap method, you'll see that it's just dropping those in, complete with the amended position within the wall, and also updating the AEC dimensions as we go. And for the overhead doors, well, use a similar operation here, but we don't need to divide it into 4. We'll simply use the one on the standard menu here, which subdivides between 2 points. So there we are. So that's given us the positions, the setting out positions for the centres. So you can just drop those in very quickly. There we are. And then choose our overhead door, and again, just getting out far enough so we can see the AEC dimensions, come down our catalogue, go for the industrial overhead door, bring it in, and drop it in. Now you can see that we have, again, just to adjust this, if we wanted to do that, we can go to our anchor positions, and I'll just make that suitable for the particular construction that we're using here, so just move it back, and then we can copy that and just copy it across. Okay, and we'll see that we have the dimensions automatically updating as we do that. And then the final one here, and that gives us our finished plan. Now, construction lines we finished with, so we can remove those. If we go to a 3-dimensional view, we'll see that whilst we have the roof on the original, we haven't on here. So we'll put that in now. We'll go to a solid view. But just to remind ourselves, we started off with just a polyline there. So there is our polyline, and we can use that for setting out the roof. Because if we go for our AEC Build Tools, on the roof, we have the option there, polyline circle. We can put in what type of roof we want. So we've got gable, we've got hipped. We can just toggle through all of the different types of roofs. So the gable roof, possibly very useful for industrial buildings too, but we're just going to go with the gable roof. 6 degrees pitch, 6 metres high, polyline or circle, and then this is the fascia height. So we'll say extend to walls, OK there, pick on the polyline, and that's produced our roof. Now of course we wanted a gabled roof, so this is asking us for the position for the gable now, so we can just turn around into a plan view, and that will allow us just to not only put the gable on there, but indicate the wall to trim up to that roof too. And then just tilting, so this is using the shift and the left click button will do the same thing there and the same thing on our wall. So we have our complete building now. So there's our building. If we go back to plan view, so here we are back at our plan view, which we can look at in different render modes. So if you want to see the different aspects for our building, but here we're going to create the 2D elevational views as we see here, but for this particular building. So how do we do that? Well, very simple, straightforward. We just use the Build Tools again, vertical section, in essence an elevation. So we'll just start our elevation here. We can use the polar tracking to make sure that we're nice and orthogonal to the building. Right click, option end, drag the extents of our view, and we'll place the view. And then for the end elevation, very similar, quick section, right click, option end to the other end of the building, and we'll place our elevation there. And if we want to, we can just make them line up very nicely, so we can pick on our elevation here and just line it through so they're nicely arranged. And we could do the other elevations as well. On the original, we'll notice that we had some trim. So how do we put that on? Well, that's very simple as well. All we do is go to our 3D model, put it into a rendered view, shaded view, pick up our UCS, just double click in there. We're in freehand snap, so we can just apply it to the face of the building. We'll choose to draw a polyline, just choosing endpoint snap here. Don't need the polar tracking on, so I'll just draw literally up to the eaves and then back down again. And then we'll take our UCS, snapping onto the face of the building, drawing in our polyline. Right across the face of the building and then down to the end. For the end elevation, very similar. Onto the face of the building, draw our polyline, again choosing our snap mode, endpoint snap, up to the apex, and then down. And then finally we could do the back of the building as well, so we could put the trim along there. So picking our snap mode, and then down. Okay, so back to the face of our building, so we can see where we are here. We have the polylines, which we could see there, so just outlined it in polylines. We could go to use our structural members now, and we have our trim pieces, so we've got ones for each way facing on our building. We're going to do it as a beam, do a polyline, and all we need to do is just pick onto the trim panel, onto the polyline, which will give us our trim, just automatically tracing around. We can do a complementary one on the other face, and there are our trim panels. Now to introduce the trim panels onto our elevations, we just simply select the section and then say add to all sections. Those other objects I can just drag over the whole of the building and it will just automatically add those to it. So having generated our plan and elevations, we can now look to our 3D model. Roller shutter doors, bollards and so on. Now under our view tools we can set up our environment settings, so where in the world we are, what orientation we are, what time of day and year. We can also dictate how the light is treated in terms of bouncing and so on. We can apply materials, so with the materials we've got our render materials, so we can apply cladding, for instance. We can have particular profiled sheeting or the trim panels or whatever it needs to be. We can apply those literally by attaching to object, picking it, and then just indicating, as it says down here, indicating the object we wish. We can also set backgrounds and foregrounds. So with the backgrounds, I've got a scaled image here. We can see the image just giving us an industrial unit setting there, so sky and so forth included, and then we'll just render this. So we don't need anything particularly high here, but we'll have the output to the screen. We can adjust the tone mapping within our model, and in our views we can incorporate any vehicles, people, or anything of that nature that we want to. So this incorporates the model within the scene. It includes shadows, so you see the shadows projecting onto the overhead roller shutter doors there, and giving us something that would enable us to convince our clients much more of what we're trying to provide for them. And we could also save the image to pass on to our clients to provide them with something much more concrete in terms of what we're looking to provide for them than just simple plans and elevations. So there we have a very quick way of creating those industrial buildings, producing the 2D plans, 2D elevations, 3D models, and the three-dimensional renders too.
Discover many more Caddie tutorial videos on the Caddie software channel on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter for frequent news and updates. And why not download your own evaluation copy and try out Caddie for yourself? And whilst you're evaluating, you can get free help and advice via the live support on the website or through the numbers given on screen.